Hey, Pat Batchelor here. Wanted just to touch base today and tell you about the lessons that I've learned since contracting COVID. If you've ever caught COVID, the thing about it is it can be very scary. A lot of people are worried about it and anxious because, rightfully so, it's a pretty tough disease. But I'll just tell you a little bit my story. Went to Texas for Thanksgiving. Wore my mask both in the airplane, at the airport, throughout our trip. Most of the time, anytime I was in public, I certainly wore my mask. And yet, when I got home, felt fine. Still social distance from most of my friends, and had my mask on. As I saw different friends and family, and then. And then one afternoon, I started having a little bit of cough in my throat. It felt a little awkward and a little weird. And then the next thing you know, the next day, it had gotten a little bit more down in my chest, and I was running just a low-grade fever. So that lasted for a couple of days. And then I decided to go to the doctor, and sure enough, I was diagnosed with COVID. So a little sheepish and going, oh my gosh. And then, a little bit for a bit there, you kind of ponder, well, is this going to get worse or is it going to get better? Thankfully for me, it cleared up pretty much within 2 to 3 days. I had a bit of a cough and a cough in my chest, and had a low grade fever, and still probably even after a week now, just a little bit of fatigue. And so that's the kind of the symptom side of things. But the biggest lesson I learned was the hardest part about COVID, unless your immune system, or unless you have to go to the hospital. And some people do suffer terribly from this disease. But the worst thing you have to do is to call up your friends and tell them that you tested positive. And now the ones that you didn't see during those, week or two, but between when you think you might have caught it, or those 10 days when you think you might have caught it, and when you started noticing the symptoms, apparently during that particular time you can be you can spread it to other people. And so that was probably the worst part of the whole thing, was having to call up friends and family and say, okay, I caught it, I'm sorry guys. And then you have to kind of go back through your schedule and say, did I have lunch with anybody? Was I close to anybody? Did I go over anybody's house? And there was quite a few, not a crazy number, but it was a reminder that, as I sit across from the table from someone, there's a chance I'm giving them, we're passing diseases back and forth, whether it was COVID or anything else. And so I was very thankful that there was a good number of the people on that list that, I may have had lunch with, but we sat outside, we stayed away from each other well more than 5 or 6 feet. And in those instances, I just felt like I had done the right thing by my friends, by practicing social distancing and staying away from them. So, we all have to be aware of our friends and family. We all have to take a certain amount of risk in our day-to-day life. But I can just say that if you are leaning into, if you are leaning into the questions of whether I should go out or not, I would just certainly encourage you to think if it is, because there's no warning. You don't feel bad. There's nothing unusual for the first week or so while you have the disease. So just be aware that you very well could be giving it to whoever you're sitting across the table from. So that's the first biggest takeaway for me, is it's just learning humility and saying, guys, I'm sorry I tested positive. And if you've taken the steps to stay healthy yourself, you've either isolated or wore your mask or whatever you needed to do, you're just going to feel better because you've actually, you haven't been part of the problem. And I guess for my sake, I've realized I was part of the problem, and so it's it is a humbling thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was one thing that I learned in Georgia, according to state law. There's two types of things that you can do when you are diagnosed with COVID, and one of them is you get to go to the doctor. So if you're sick, you're welcome to go to the doctor. The other thing that you can do is to vote. And because of the current political situation here in Georgia, the early voting has started for the U.S. Senate here. There's two races. My wife Brenda and I, we went out and voted the other day. And I did it, of course, I wore a mask. I stayed away from everybody. And I made sure Brenda stood behind me and kept people away from me behind me. I didn't stand near anybody that was in front of me while we were waiting in line. We were able to get in and out pretty quick. I had a mask. I had and so felt very safe, but was able to vote. So apparently, there's two things you can do. The one other thing that I found that is always a challenge, and it's interesting every day as I think about DIY and how to go about looking for a job, is just our daily attitude is just such a challenge, especially if you don't feel good. If you don't feel 100%, our mind and our body and our spirit is all connected. It's all connected. And so if you're sick in body, you're going to feel it, and your attitude may be off a little bit. Your perspective may be off a little bit. And so you have to be careful and aware that maybe you're sick, you need to slow down a little bit. And so for me, I certainly had to slow down, and you don't don't beat yourself up. Don't give yourself a hard time. And so one of the things I've tried to do is learn to be kind to myself and treat myself, to different treats from time to time. We had a pizza the other night. It was great. So it can be small things or big things, but being kind to yourself and having a good self-image it affects every area of our life, whether you're employed or unemployed. So being aware of yourself and how you can recharge your batteries, whether you're sick or healthy, those are important life lessons to know and to understand. And just to realize, look, I've got to give myself a little bit of extra time or space to make sure that I'm in a healthy headspace, so to speak. And so it was a good lesson to learn there is that, learning humility, just learning that, wow, you just have to be aware of yourself. And then the last thing I learned is that when you're self-isolating, I was at the grocery store, I guess 3 weeks ago, and bought a bag of pretzels, thinking, oh, okay, yeah, I like pretzels, and so, but unfortunately, these pretzels are salt-free pretzels. And I guess the question is, what's the point? Because every time I eat one, I just go, there's no taste to it. It's just very, very bland. And I'm sure, the pretzel people, Snyder's, they go, well, yeah, a lot of our customers love our salt-free pretzels. And well, that may be true. Maybe they have a salt issue or whatever in their diet, and they love pretzels. But I just say, what is the point with a salt-free pretzel? Who knows? But anyway, so, but one thing I will just say, the final thing here before I chuck off is being aware of your attitude is so important. I was talking to in self-limiting beliefs. Again, there's two conversations I wanted to talk to. One was I was having a conversation with a guy the other day, and he says, well, it's between Thanksgiving and New Year's and nobody's hiring. And guys, that's just not true. I've had 4 or 5 companies in the last 3 weeks contact me saying, hey, we're looking for someone. And then they give me an idea of what they look for. And you just go, my gosh, there's still companies out looking, even right now, looking for jobs, looking for not jobs, but looking for candidates to fill roles. So in that sense, I would just say is don't assume that nobody's hiring. People are absolutely hiring. They're looking for people right now. And so if you're on LinkedIn and you're looking for the next step, go ahead and be active, post something on LinkedIn or do whatever you can to keep it updated. So that's the next step there. And then the other thing is if you're struggling with self-esteem or an attitude or whatever, boy, please try to check it as much as possible at the door before you go into an interview. You want to be as positive, motivated, and enthusiastic about every job opportunity and every interview that you have. Don't make the assumption that the job that you're interviewing is not any good or is not interesting. You want to always, always, always put your best foot forward anytime you go to interview for a job, because even if you're interviewing for a job and let's say that the job is maybe 1 or even 2 steps below where you are in your career, you still want to go 110%. Now you may be honest with the people and they're going to recognize it as well. They're going to go, you know what, this guy's good, but he's probably 2 levels above. Well, that's okay. You can even acknowledge, this role may be a little bit lower than it is for me. But you don't ever want to mail it in and have a bad attitude. You don't want to mail it in and not be interesting. You don't want to mail it in and just not care about the job, or worse yet, be rude to the interviewer and waste their time. So one of the things I'll just say is always be on point. And if you aren't excited about a job, don't let that show. Just say, hey, I'm here. I want to learn and get to meet you. And if nothing else, it's just a get to meet you meeting. So that's it for today. Those are the lessons that I learned. And I think the biggest lesson and the last takeaway point is being humble. I think humility is one of the least exalted attitudes but it's the most important attitude. I think being humble is maybe the most important attitude as a human being, because when we're humble, then we can get our eyes off of ourselves and we can lower ourselves below others. And then we can have an ability to serve and to lift them up. And that's when we become truly human, is when we can do that. So sometimes it's humility, both before other men that are in the field, as well as before God. And that's exceedingly important. So all that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day. Have a great job search. And thanks for joining in. Take care. Bye-bye.